There was a second phone behind the water heater, still warm from his hand. The first text I opened wasn't from a mistress. It was from my 8-year-old daughter's 3rd grade teacher. My name is Tammy, I'm 36 years old, and I've been married to my husband Garrett for 11 years. We have one daughter, Lila, and until last October I would have told you we were the boring kind of happy. The kind of couple who fights about dishwasher loading and falls asleep watching the same show. I want you to remember that, because everything I'm about to tell you happened inside what looked, from the outside, like a perfectly ordinary American family. Garrett works in commercial insurance. He's the steady one, the guy who remembers birthdays, who coaches Lila's soccer team on Saturdays, who brings me coffee in bed because he knows I can't function without it. Our friends used to joke that he made the rest of the husbands look bad. Lila started 3rd grade last August at Bellevue Elementary, and her teacher was a woman named Miss Rachel Connor. Young, maybe 26, blonde, the kind of teacher who decorates her classroom with fairy lights and remembers every kid's favorite color. Lila adored her. I liked her too. At the Meet the Teacher night, Garrett shook her hand and said the polite things husbands say, and I didn't think anything of it. I should have. Looking back, there were small things. Garrett started volunteering for the school's fall festival, which he'd never done before. He offered to do all the parent-teacher pickups. He'd come home from those quick 15-minute conferences looking pale, distracted, scrolling something on his phone. He'd flip face down when I walked in. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself good marriages don't survive suspicion. So I swallowed it down, the way wives do, and I waited for the feeling to pass. It didn't pass. The phone wasn't even hidden well. That's what hurt most, later. He'd taped a cheap black Android to the back of the water heater in our basement utility closet, and one Saturday morning while he was at Lila's soccer practice, I went down to swap the laundry and I heard it buzz. Just a soft, insectile buzz against metal. I almost didn't investigate. I pulled it free. The screen lit up. No password. He hadn't even bothered with a password because he never imagined I'd be the one holding it. The most recent message was from a contact saved only as R. It said, "She asked about you again today." I told her what we agreed. "Please tell me you're handling your end." I scrolled up. Months of messages. Hundreds. Going back to early September, 3 weeks after Lila started school. And the contact's number, I checked it against the school directory on my own phone, belonged to Miss Rachel Connor. I sat down on the concrete floor and I read every single one. It wasn't an affair. That's the thing. There was no flirting, no "I miss yous," no photos. It was something else. They were talking about Lila. Specifically, they were talking about things Lila had said in class. Things about a man who came to see her sometimes. A man Lila called the other daddy. My husband had been paying Miss Connor to keep my daughter quiet. I read those messages 4 times before I could stand up. Garrett had been sending Miss Connor $500 a month through a payment app in exchange for her flagging anything Lila said about a man named Brett, redirecting the conversation, telling Lila those were just dreams, telling the school counselor not to worry. Brett. I knew that name. Brett was Garrett's older brother, who'd been quietly cut out of our lives 4 years ago after what Garrett told me was a drunken argument at Thanksgiving. Garrett had said Brett was unstable, that he didn't want him around Lila. I'd agreed. I'd trusted him. But Brett had been around Lila. He'd been picking her up from after-school care on the days Garrett did pick up. Miss Connor had seen him. She'd asked questions. And instead of protecting our daughter, my husband had paid a 26-year-old teacher to help him bury whatever Brett was doing in our daughter's life. I didn't confront him that night. I'm not proud of what I did instead, but I'm not sorry either. I made copies of every message. I screenshot the payment history. I drove to a UPS store and emailed the entire archive to myself, to my sister Jolene, and to a family lawyer I found through a friend. Then I picked Lila up from soccer practice and I asked her gently in the car if Uncle Brett ever came to see her at school. She looked at me with those huge brown eyes and she said, "Mommy, Daddy said I'm not supposed to talk about that." Daddy said it would make you sad. I told her she would never have to keep that secret again. I didn't scream at Garrett. I didn't throw anything. The next morning, while he was in the shower, I drove Lila to my sister's house in the next town over. Then I came home, set the second phone on the kitchen counter next to a printed copy of the lawyer's letter, and I waited. When he saw it, he went grey. He actually staggered, caught himself on the counter. He started talking fast. Brett had problems. Brett had threatened him. He was protecting Lila. He was protecting me. He didn't know how to tell me. Miss Connor was just helping. I told him to get out of my house. I told him the police already had everything. I told him that whatever Brett had done, and whatever he had covered up, was going to be unpacked by people whose job it was to unpack it, and his only choice now was whether he cooperated. The investigation took 4 months. Brett is awaiting trial on charges I won't repeat here because Lila deserves her privacy. Miss Connor lost her teaching license and is facing charges of her own. Garrett took a plea for failure to report and obstruction. He'll serve 18 months. Lila is in therapy with a wonderful woman named Dr. Patel. She's drawing again. She's laughing again. Last week she told me she felt safe in our house for the first time she could remember, and I had to leave the room so she wouldn't see me cry. People ask me how I didn't know, how I lived next to that man for 11 years and didn't feel it. I don't have a clean answer. I think love makes you generous with the benefit of the doubt, and I think monsters know that, and I think the worst ones don't look like monsters at all. They coach soccer. They bring you coffee. If you'd been me, standing in that basement with a stranger's phone in your hand, would you have read every message, or would you have put it back and pretended you never heard it buzz? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. I'm just glad I listened the first time it rang.